Welcome to the Prescription Strength Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lynette Hewitt, GP and personal trainer, bringing you health and strength without the hype. Thanks for listening. Emma, thank you for giving me some time this morning. I really appreciate it. I would love to start by getting a bit of an idea of who comes to see you in the general population, because I would say that as a GP, I don't meet many people who've been to see a nutritionist unless they've got a very specific thing that conventional healthcare is failing them on, and they tend to fall into certain brackets. But I'll open the floor to you to give us an idea of why people are coming to you. What's their journey?
Yeah. So it would be amazing, wouldn't it, if everybody could see a dietitian or a nutritionist, just because it's so helpful. But you're right, it tends to be when people have got something going on. So I specialize in women's health, but particularly in menopause. And essentially that started because when I was going through perimenopause 11 years ago, I wasn't getting the help that I needed. And there was this kind of real chasm, I guess, at the time. Obviously, things have really cranked up in the menopause world now, and it's very noisy now. And
Thanks, Davina.
there's always, yeah, I know, cheers. The Davina effect, people talk about it being a positive thing. It is, because it's brilliant that we're talking about it, but it's also very muddy sometimes. And suddenly, just because somebody's going through it, they think they're an expert. So to answer your question though, sorry, long-winded answer, the people that come to see me tend to be perimenopausal, postmenopausal. They are struggling with lots of things, because we all know that there are myriad symptoms, but the big players are weight gain, energy, and actually this kind of, it's a little bit less hard to put your finger on, but just not feeling themselves. They have lost their sense of self. They've lost their sense of joy. And that isn't necessarily nutrition. A lot of what I do actually is about just listening to people and a bit of a kind of therapeutic two-way chat.
How do they tend to find you?
Through Instagram,
Okay.
Yeah, it's almost like websites are obsolete now. Most people tend to come to me via Instagram.
Yeah, because it's stating the obvious to say how people come to me with all those symptoms you've described. They book an appointment and they go, help.
Yeah.
And as GPs, we have a very short space of time. Depending on where you work, sometimes you can follow people up and you can add those 10 minutes up over a number of weeks or months. But the initial kind of, I've been keeping a list of what's wrong, and out comes the notebook or the phone with the list, makes a lot of us go, oh, okay, where do I start? And I think that's part of why people end up with a prescription a lot of the time, especially if you're a less experienced doctor. You want to do something, so you order a test or you order a prescription. And actually, like you say, as you get more experience, you realize people need to be listened to first and foremost. And at that life stage, that massive crossroads of midlife for women, there's often a hell of a lot going on, isn't there? It's not just the hormonal chaos, it's career, it's kids, it's life stress.
Yeah.
So where do you tend to start with someone?
So luckily I have the privilege of spending an hour and a half, with each client. It's one-on-one, so it's very much you're digging into them and their personal life story. And what I usually do, I should just caveat this, I'm not actually seeing clients at the moment, so I'm writing books, but I would get them before so that we're really maximizing every minute together, I would get them to fill in a 3 or 4 day food diary just to give me an idea. So before I even see them, I got an idea of what they're eating. They would fill in a kind of lengthy questionnaire. But very often, interestingly, Lynette, I will also get them, if they can, to talk to their GP and get a sort of broad baseline blood test done. Because quite often the symptoms of particularly perimenopause, mimic lots of other things. So things like thyroid issues, particularly low iron is massive. That's a huge one. And lots of the symptoms that women report, so things like hair thinning, itchy skin, anxiety, restless legs, this extreme kind of bone crushing fatigue. A lot of it is actually down to the fact that they have post pregnancy or whatever, or because of heavy periods, they have not got their iron levels to this kind of really nice replete level. So that's often where I start.
Yeah, and I think as well, if at that life stage, hormonal contraception tends to, we see less of it. I'm not saying we still don't see plenty of it, but because people are having permanent methods of contraception, one way or another, the pill is used less. So sometimes women adjust to just having heavier periods and they get used to it and they live with it and they don't realize that slowly sometimes the bucket's emptying a little bit and just they're not putting back what they're losing every month. We don't see it in men at that life stage because they're not regularly losing a lot of blood.
Mm.
And I think absolutely, and it's certainly a very easy, low hanging fruit intervention to go, okay, let's start with a panel of bloods. The classic phrase we tend to teach our trainees is the tired all the time
Yeah.
panel. In fact, at some point, I'm going to do an episode just on what to expect if you go to your doctor feeling tired all the time, whatever life stage you're at, because I think whichever chapter you're in of life, it presents different challenges. So I agree. I think that's a really helpful thing. The difficulty is as a doctor when everything comes back normal. And so often, when follow-up appointments are hard to come by, they'll just get a message from reception or through the app that says, "Oh, your bloods are all normal, off you go." And people go, "Oh shit, now what?
Yeah.
What do you mean normal? But I feel like crap." And that's paves the way, hopefully, then to, if I see them again, to start to get into, okay, what does your life look like? What's going on? Give me a flavour of that. God, I'd love people to be able to fill in a few documents before they come in and we could get straight to it. But that's just not the way that we work.
Also, normal sometimes isn't, and this word optimal is really kind of overused on social media at the moment, but sometimes you do want to be a little bit better than normal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Particularly when it comes to iron, because that spectrum of normal is massive, isn't it? As you know. So, just trying sometimes, I also, I've got the time to look at those numbers and we can really kind of try and work on optimizing them, getting them a little bit higher.
Yeah, yeah. So is there a thing that a pattern? I often say to people, look, most of what we do as doctors is pattern recognition. And the longer you've been doing it, the more you spot those patterns, but you still sometimes trip up. Is there a particular pattern in the women that you see that you start to get that sense early on of, oh yeah, I know where this is going in terms of what they're eating and how they're living?
Yeah, there's a pattern of I haven't changed anything, but I'm feeling really, really pretty dire. And also, I don't eat that much. A lot of people are like, I don't eat that much, but I'm putting on lots of weight, and I just nothing I'm doing that I used to do is kind of touching the sides anymore. So I think quite often, possibly that is true, but I think a lot of women are so time poor and they are so far down the list of, when it comes to important things to do, they're looking after everybody else before themselves. And so I think sometimes they are not even they've lost touch with their bodies and what's going on, and they are shoveling food in when they can because they're constantly on the fly. So again, it comes down to really putting things almost kind of under a microscope so that we can really tease out the big hitters, the kind of big players, where they can easily, because nobody's got a lot of time, where they can easily make changes. And quite often that will be they've noticed some body composition changes, so they are trying to eat less, so they are fasting, so they're skipping breakfast. Quite
Yeah.
often, it doesn't work for everyone, but putting back that breakfast, making sure that it is protein rich, has a huge knock-on effect almost within days. Lots of different things, but particularly with energy and with mood. Because when you are feeling really depleted, and you've been through an overnight fast and you are not kind of fueling yourselves, and then possibly doing some quite intensive exercise, because again, you've seen all these changes and you want to kind of hammer home and kind of turn it around as quickly as possible, it makes you feel pretty lousy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it was your messaging about protein that one of my clients had seen and went, Lynette, she sounds like you. Because I guess my lens is my business, Prescription Strength, is getting people, women particularly, lifting weights. And in order to get the best out of that, you've got to fuel it. And that fuel, those building blocks in that wall, come in the form of protein. But in clinic, I have literally had patients say to me, "Yeah, but what is protein?" And this is what we have to remember, is what everybody brings to the table, because people's lives are different, people's interests are different. Some people don't care about food until they don't feel very well, and you go, "There might be something in this." So, yeah, some people don't really have a handle on what that is and what that looks like, never mind how much of it. That's next level to start getting into how much of it per day, per meal, or how to get it into your shopping bag. But I agree. I think the women of, I'm 47, women of my generation are still carrying with them this: eat less. If I eat less, I can't possibly put weight on. I just can't possibly do it. And it gets complicated, doesn't it, to help people to understand. It's a bit more nuanced than that. There's a lot going on.
Well, also, there's a lot of behavioral stuff going on. So that if you are, a lot of women that I see are restricting, restricting, and restricting, it gets to the end of the day and they cannot contain themselves any longer. And then they are overeating at night, which then possibly has a knock-on effect with blood sugar levels, which then impacts sleep. And then you have a shitty night's sleep. And then the
Mm.
next morning you are much hungrier. We know from the research that if you've had a poor night's sleep, you can kind of overeat the next day and the next day after that by 300 to 500 calories. So it's a snowball effect, isn't it? And very much, I guess, our respective jobs is simplifying stuff and kind of trying to get women to prioritize. You can't do everything. You can't overhaul everything all at once. You need to prioritize, and actually pulling a few big levers. Sometimes that's all you have to do.
Absolutely. I think I've been wedded to the protein strategy as the low hanging fruit for quite some time. And I am very much coming round to the value of fiber. But it's, for my experience, 20 years as a doctor, it's the new kid on the block, I would say. And I loved how you framed it in the book. The book, for anybody who is watching on YouTube, is, I highly recommend it. And there are lots of parallels with what I try and get people to start thinking about when I'm working with them in my coaching business, in that the fiber, we weren't talking about fiber 15 years ago in any great detail, as far as I can remember. And so now it needs to come in alongside the other stuff that we're talking about. But I see people going, okay, so which one needs to become first? Which, if I'm going to pick off the low hanging fruit, which one's more important? And that can depend, as I see, depending on what people have seen on their feed in the morning when they're having a coffee or they're waiting for the train to work. People are confused about how to prioritize all of this stuff. Are you finding that with the women that you're seeing?
Yeah, very much. Fiber is unsexy, isn't it? People just associate it with pooing. All brand, it's bland and it's boring. It really needs some PR, and I think that is coming because I think protein, brilliantly, is having its moment right now. But I do think maybe people are becoming a little bit saturated by the protein message.
Yeah.
So hopefully they marry up beautifully. They both bring about satiety. They're really helpful when it comes to things like weight loss, but also with energy. They both tick so many boxes. So yeah, it is something that I'm seeing. But I think what people don't realize is that you don't have to be kind of chowing down on chicken breasts and beef and 5 eggs to get your protein. You can actually get it from lots of plant sources too. So there's things like tofu. I think unfortunately people often don't know how to cook tofu. So in the book, yeah,
Guilty.
exactly. And it's kind of been the reserve of hippies and vegans, but actually it ticks both boxes. So it's really high in protein and it's really high in fiber. So in the book, I talk about easy ways to cook things like tofu and tempeh, but also kind of adding to people's shopping lists. So encouraging them to buy some frozen edamame beans or some
Mhm.
frozen peas. Peas, just your bog standard pea, is a brilliant source of both of these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Making life easier, isn't it, essentially?
100%, because if it isn't going to last. It's just going to get filed on the fad shelf, and that's not where it needs to be, because it needs to become part of how we live. And I will often say to patients and to clients that I'm working with, run this through the filter of, is this sustainable? This is a great example of fasting. yeah, fasting can be used as a tool to manage your calorie budget if you want to lose weight. But if you're only doing it temporarily, what does next year look like when the skipped breakfast to get you to position A has to be put back in? Oh, yeah, you're going to end up back where you were. So, if you are eating ludicrous amounts of exotic things that you know you have to order online and you can't get them wherever you do your shopping, it's probably not that sustainable. The other challenge, I don't know how much this comes up with the women, is making it fit with your family.
Yes, I was going to say that.
Oh, God.
Yeah, if you're living with a partner, you've got to get them on board. Yeah, the kids need to. Otherwise, you're cooking what 3 or 4 different things,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is crazy.
Yeah, and I think that is a significant barrier for women if you're feeding a family. I've got teenagers, and there is nothing more frustrating than knocking something up and thinking you've covered all bases, only for everyone to go, "Oh, what's that?" Oh, or my son will give it a score. He'll go, "Oh, that's only a 4 out of 10."
You're like, I
Yeah,
think actually getting kids on board, going through recipe books, telling them to pick out the things that they think you might enjoy, getting them to tweak it. Sometimes even if they're younger, possibly not teenagers, but getting them involved in the cooking process means that they're a bit more kind of into it a little bit more, and they're a little bit more likely to kind of enjoy it.
yeah, yeah. I think as well, and and revisiting that this week, is that batch cooking, because there will be. I find with teenagers, their schedules now are changing, and they want to be out and not back for dinner. And I thought, actually, this just isn't working. So I need to find a workaround that involves stuff being in the freezer that actually, at least I can default to that, or they can default to that, because it's. So I've just discovered this lady yesterday, the Batch Lady. Who knew? She's had a Channel 4 series, she's got books out, and her whole thing is batch cooking. So let's see if she transforms
Amazing.
the next chapter of my cooking life.
Just written
But
that down. I will be following her.
yeah, she's Scottish. It sounds like she started with a YouTube channel, and as things have grown, so yeah, as Amazon will be delivering her books to me later on today to do a batch cook. I wanted to get your thoughts on certain foods that get a lot of attention online as being superfoods. And I've previously bought into the superfood thing. I remember sitting in the coffee room in my old practice years ago, and the practice manager had been at some event at the golf club, and she was banging on about watercress. Watercress, it's a superfood, Lynette. Did you not know it's a watercress? And I was the person that people would look to when anyone talked about food. And I think I've probably come full circle and gone, actually, there's no such thing really. There's good food and there's shit food. But what are your thoughts on this? What do people bring to you in terms of, but Emma, what do you think about this that's going to it's going to cure cancer and save my life?
So most of the things actually that they come to me with in that kind of domain are things like supplements and
Okay.
powders and blends. The one that really irks me is green powders. There's a famous one that lots of podcast
Athletic greens.
it is.
Yeah.
It's ludicrous. It's got, they purport to have all these hundreds of thousands of different things in there, tiny microscopic amounts. Who knows by the time it's been freeze dried and gone through this kind of dehydration process, who knows how much goodness is actually left in there. It's a subscription, anything like that just immediately gets my back up. And it just upsets me that women are spending their hard-earned cash on that rather than going to Aldi and picking up some beans and some chickpeas and frozen mixed berries, because really those are the superfoods. There's no one particular food that's better or ingredient that's better than anything else, but collectively we just need diversity. And it's why I talk about 30 plants, the 30 grams of fiber. We're looking at lots of different variety. That whole kind of, I know it's really trite, but the whole eating the rainbow message, really, that is your multivitamin. That is, I think, where people need to start and try and kind of cull or, drown out the noise from all of these influencers who are pushing supplements and getting a kickback, and quite often not declaring that they get it free, it's gifted, that their little kind of blah 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 loves discount code means that every single purchase, that they're getting something back. And this is the thing that really bugs me. There's a certain person who, she's not even qualified in nutritional or dietetics or anything, and every single week, day, she is pushing something else. Now, I just would love anybody listening to put their sensible head on and recognize you need to be a little bit more discerning than you currently are. And anybody that's pushing this amount, this sheer volume of supplements clearly isn't taking them. And if they
Mm.
are, they're obviously not working, because why do they need, this constant kind of barrage?
Yeah, it's the shortcut, isn't it? And the marketing. I've said this about collagen. I don't want to go off on a tangent about collagen. I'll be here all day. But look at the marketing. Why bother? If you've got a pot of money, why bother to spend it on clinical trials, which are extortionately expensive, when you could use that same budget and just pay a really clever marketing team to sell you the benefits? And we're all pushed for time. So the idea that you can just pick up this particular product that ticks all of those boxes, I get it. I get it. But the reality is, if you look at healthy populations and what they're eating, generally across a lifespan, not for small periods of time, they're not full of powders and potions and special blends of this, that, and the other, are they? It's
Blue zones, the people in the blue zones, the Hadza tribes, they are not eating collagen. And, the thing with collagen, just briefly, is it's protein. If you're eating enough protein, you're going to be getting collagen. Eating a collagen powder doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to go to your clothes feet or wherever it is that you want it.
yeah,
And also, just on it, because collagen really gets me. The thing about collagen is most of the influencers who are pushing it are also full of Botox and fillers and stuff like that. They are the kind of people who are throwing a ton of money at all of these kind of things. It's not the collagen, trust me. And the sort of small benefits that collagen, because it's mild to moderate, into the research, mild to moderate benefits in terms of elasticity and hydration. Great, that's you, amazing, and it's within your budget, then go for it. But it's small, it's
yeah.
negligible. There are so many things, big rocks underneath that you could be doing.
Yeah, and I often say to people, because people will ask me, should I take it or not? Okay, you have to make that decision. But I always say, what's your exit plan? Because what if you do get all this amazing, lovely skin? You're taking that forever. So at what
Well,
point do
if
you?
it was that amazing, I'd be happy to invest. I mean, I'm vain. I would absolutely be doing it, but it just doesn't
Yeah,
way. And I do know lots of my clients swear by it. And it's like, it's not doing you any harm. All it's doing is
yeah.
making a hole in your wallet.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't seen anything to make me think it's harmful. It's just that it's quite aggressive marketing at women, as usual. It's always us that are expected to look youthful and beautiful forever. The men are allowed to turn into raisins quite quietly in the background. Nobody says anything. Okay, yeah. So your hit list would be more about powders and things. I am getting very tired of the anti-cancer narrative around certain foods in the nutrition space. I get very defensive about people making these unrealistic health claims. It's very hard to support a patient through a cancer diagnosis and journey. And I've done lots of palliative care over the years. And the idea that you could have avoided it if you'd just eaten a few more blueberries and avocados makes my blood boil. So that certainly, I think, is something that if anybody's seeing those messages, please just dig a little bit deeper and ask who that person's being paid by or what it is they're trying to sell you at the end of that.
Yeah, I've recently there's this one kind of influencer who's very big on pills and potions and MCT oil. And she had been going on about how flax seeds were causing cancer. So flax seeds is something that I talk about quite a lot, really good form of fiber. They've got some phytoestrogens in them, which is where the kind of link, I guess, influencer had made with cancer. But, it's just preposterous. It's causing so much anxiety in women, because it is. You're right. It's usually marketed women. So
Yeah. Yeah. We're more vulnerable to this, certainly.
vulnerable.
Yeah. How do you think perhaps GPs and nutritionists could work better together?
I'd be amazing if it's just not going to happen, but it would just be
No, just
amazing to have them working alongside each other and being able to report back to each other, refer people on. But yeah, it doesn't happen. I think there is a lot of GP shaming, isn't there? Unfortunately,
Yeah, yeah.
Of GP bashing, sorry, not shaming, but bashing. I think it would do everybody the world of good to kind of remember that GPs are incredibly pushed for time. They know so much about so many conditions and are expected to do incredible amount in a very short space of time. I think what would be really helpful is if there was almost like a filtering system so that by the time you got to your GP, you knew exactly what you wanted. You could kind of make the most of those kind of really valuable 8 to 10 minutes. And with my menopause clients, we talk about than going in with reams and reams of notes and stuff. We very much talk about the most out of that appointment and keeping it really short and succinct.
Yeah.
Going in with your biggest kind of bugbears, your biggest symptoms, but also having an idea of what the kind of care that you're looking for.
Yeah, I agree. And you can certainly feed this back to the ladies that you work with, that I personally feel as a doctor, people coming in and advocating for themselves and saying, look, I've done a bit of research and this is what I'd like to find out, or you to test me for, is absolutely fine. But people are hesitant and say, oh, but I'm not a doctor. No, but you are an expert in
Yeah,
you, and we have 10 or 15 minutes here to try and sometimes whittle down an entire 10 years perhaps of a symptom. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with advocating for yourself. You don't need to start the story back in 1984 when you fell off your bike and that's when the problem began. The older populations were slightly more guilty of that. But actually think of it as, I just need to get to the point straight away. And I don't think a good GP will think that you are telling them how to do their job. If they're that threatened, you probably need a new doctor anyway.
yeah.
Yeah.
How do you feel? Because I'm always telling people to go ask for blood tests. How do you feel about that as a GP? Is that really annoying?
No, not at all. Providing it's not because it's not some quite harebrained idea. Blood tests, easy to do. I do tend to say to people, you have to bear in mind there are limits to what the NHS will test for. And nutrition testing is particularly poor for most areas that I've worked in. In the hospital, the dietitians have got better access to more bespoke testing, but that's not available in the community a lot of the time. So blood tests are usually fine, but I will preempt that with, be realistic. You're going to get a very broad spectrum look at things. And we can talk about that when we get the results through. Imaging is different, and that's probably not something that comes onto your radar. But people coming in and going, I need a whole body MRI because all my joints are aching, and you go, oh, this is gonna be a long one. Yeah. Yeah. So I think the fact that just because something's normal, it doesn't mean we don't believe you. I think that's really, if people only take one message home from this conversation, from my side of things, it would be, we're not saying because it's normal, it means you're making it up. It just means we probably haven't got early indications of pathology. And that's first and foremost what we're trying to rule out. But I think certainly in the perimenopausal population, you can have really uncomfortable joints, terrible fatigue, weight doing all sorts of things, mood all over the place, and your bloods can look absolutely normal.
Yeah,
Doesn't mean it's not real.
yeah.
Absolutely. To jump back into the food thing again, I can't let you go without asking your thoughts about sourdough. And I did assure my clients that I would bring up the sourdough issue. I'm sure they're bored of me going on about it. And largely because sourdough and gluten, I would say, let me widen it out a little bit. So, gluten has had a lot of bad publicity probably in the last 10 years. And I see lots of people who go, yeah, I had lots of abdominal pain. So I took out gluten and dairy. And I think, oh, Jesus, that's a lot of your diet that you've just put on the back burner. And I didn't feel any better, blah, blah, blah. So, in terms of gluten, how do you approach it as a nutritionist?
I mean, if anybody, sorry, this I'm supposed to be really kind of open-minded, but the minute somebody tells me they are gluten intolerant, my eyes roll to the back of my head because 1% of the population is celiac. That's,
That's an allergy for anybody. Yeah.
yeah, it's serious. You would know about it. But there is this kind of non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which I will, I think it is real. I think, though, there's these sort of trends, isn't there? And gluten definitely was a thing at one point. I think there is a lot to be said for nocebo. So, people listening will have heard of placebo. You take something, you want it to work, and instantly you feel better. Nocebo has a similarly kind of dramatic effect, whereby people eat something, they're expecting it to make them feel worse, and bingo, it does. Your brain is very clever at doing that. But what I will say is that people who take gluten out of their diets have been shown to have a much worse gut microbiome, because what you're doing is you're essentially taking out a lot of fiber. You're taking out a lot of whole grains and things like that. So by all means, try it. What's it called? An exclusion diet. They can be really effective, but make sure that that's the only thing you're taking out. I think what happens sometimes is people are like, oh, there's a lot of pathologizing about bloating, isn't there? Oh, I'm really bloated all the time. So I'm going to take out, like you say, dairy, gluten, wheat. I'm going to take out this, that, and the other. And actually what they end up doing is taking out a lot of UPFs. And yeah, they feel much better. It's not because of the gluten, it's because of the UPFs.
Yeah, and I've seen this pattern time and time again. It's that once you take anything out, you've narrowed your food choices. Therefore, you have to think a bit more about what you're eating, and it's more likely that you're just paying more attention to what you're eating, as opposed to any particular problem with gluten per se. And I think because we can screen for indicators of celiac disease, I probably see a disproportionate amount of people where gluten is on their hit list of things that must be responsible for everything. And out of that, it's probably why I've been a bit touchy about the whole sourdough being better, because what I've seen is patients will say to me, so should I eat sourdough then? Because I've heard it's easier to digest. And I will often say, what do you mean easier to digest? That means different things to different people. And I think you're being picky sometimes, but it's important to know that you're referring to the same thing. And then people fall down a little bit, but they just hear this message that, oh, well, I should just eat sourdough because it's better for my gut. Are you seeing that same assumption?
Well, I think that the link that people make is because it's made with a probiotic live starter, but obviously once it's cooked, those live bacteria are killed. So
Mm,
I think people don't recognize that. They think, oh, it's a form of probiotic. Yeah, maybe there is possibly some research showing that there's a kind of postbiotic. So even though those probiotics are dead, they have these postbiotic compounds that potentially are beneficial. But I think with the sourdough thing, it's this kind of almost elitist. I mean, I have to admit, I love it because it tastes great. But
mm.
there's a lot of elitism when it comes to nutrition. Oh, I only eat goji berries that are kind of shipped in from Peru, and grass-fed beef, and a lot of this stuff is preposterous. It's unnecessary. And again, it's kind of like this pyramid. People aren't doing the big stuff at the bottom. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's my thought really on that.
Yeah, I did go into the sourdough rabbit hole a few weeks ago again, just because there was so much talk about Jason's sourdough, which is I'm in Leicester, and Jason is from the same village as me. So his bakeries are around here and it's enormous. And so lots of people talk about it because it literally being the best thing since sliced bread. And I was just like, okay, so is it? I think it clearly has less ingredients. I was in Asda on Sunday comparing the ingredients, but actually, if you look at the fiber, there's some really good wholemeal high fiber bread just quietly sitting on the shelf next to all the newly jazzed up sourdough markets, which I would argue, to my nutritional understanding, is probably better bang for your buck if you can get 4 grams of fiber per slice in a wholemeal loaf versus 1.4, I think it was, in the sourdough. To me, that's healthier. I use the term loosely.
Yeah, there's a lot of demonization of just regular supermarket bread now, thanks to all the books, about ultra processed people and
Mm,
all of that. But what I think what people don't realize is, yeah, it's a great form of fiber. It's a great form of protein, actually, surprisingly, 4 or 5 grams of protein per
mm,
slice. There's lots of now protein breads, but actually they're on a par with just your regular bog standard supermarket loaves. And also, I treat myself to a sourdough from Gales because I love it. It's a £5. Now, not everybody can afford that. I mean, that's crazy. And what people
Mm,
don't realise is that your regular kind of supermarket loaves are fortified with things like folate. Yes,
mm.
that's probably why they come into this kind of ultra processed bracket, but you're getting fortification that way.
There was a clip somebody sent me the other week. It was Rangan Chatterjee's podcast, and he'd had whichever one of the Van Tuliken twins wrote the book. And the clip was them holding a loaf of bread, reading the ingredients list of it. And I started to feel irritated, but then I thought, I very much doubt either of those two professional men are doing the weekly shop, making sure that there's packed lunches made and that everybody is eating, and you're not chucking half of what you buy into the bin, either because your teenager decided this wasn't cool enough to eat at school and so it went in the bin or whatever. And so there are these other considerations that I think I'm probably a bit sensitive to as a mum, feeding the family and doing all the shopping, that have to be borne in mind. So you're right. I think the snobbery that is starting to emerge in the food world, it's quite wearing some of the time. And actually, we need to get back to looking at food as fuel, which can have loads of health benefits and cut through some of the elitism that seems to be certainly existing around bread, as far as I can
I
see.
mean, 90% of the UK are not eating enough fibre. That's
Mm,
huge. Most of us aren't eating 5 fruit and veg a day. So
mm.
forget your bread and start. That's the kind of stuff that we want to be really worrying about on a
Yeah.
population level.
Yeah, yeah. I was filling up with petrol the other week, and the amount of people coming out of it was an M&S petrol station, and the amount of people coming out who are clearly buying their lunch in the garage on the way to work. And I think this is general practice keeps my feet on the ground, because you see what people are eating and what they're bringing in and what they tell you. And then you go online and it's very easy to get sucked into
What
minutiae
I
that
eat in a day.
oh God.
Today's kind of girly who is, she's knocking about. She's not working 3 jobs. She hasn't got kids. Yeah,
No.
it really is.
Yeah, the fitness space certainly is lethal for that. What I eat in a day doesn't mean you're going to look like that, love, if you eat that just because she eats in a day.
She isn't
Yeah,
eating that most of the time either, let me tell you.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Okay, so is there any kind of major take-home point that you would like to leave people with in terms of if you think your diet could be better, where to start?
Okay, so you don't have to overhaul everything overnight. Keep it really simple. 3 things, and they are in the book, is look at the amount of protein that you're having, look at the amount of fiber that you're eating, and try and kind of mix up the number of plants that you are consuming. But you don't have to do all of that. If you wanted to start somewhere, I would start with breakfast. It really sets you up for the day. Doesn't matter when you eat it. If you like to kind of a little bit later in the day, absolutely fine. Start there. Batch it. You can easily make some loads of free recipes on my Instagram account. Make 3 oats recipes for the next 3 days. Have them in your fridge. Saves you an enormous amount of time. You'll get that recipe down to a fine art so that you can knock them up in 10 minutes tops. You might even get your kids on board. My kids love it, especially because they can add in their toppings and things like that. But
Mm.
yeah, the kind of takeaway that I really want people though to come home with is curate the noise that you are kind of exposing yourself to on social media. Cull people, be a bit more discerning, follow. If people are talking in these kind of binary ways without nuance, it's a red flag, quite frankly.
Yeah, I agree entirely. Actually, use your phone on your terms.
Yeah.
Generally, I think I give that advice a lot to people who I see who are very stressed out and their notifications are flashing left and center. Use it on your terms. You're in control of who comes into your feed. And absolutely, if somebody is making specific claims about a specific food, just walk away. You're allowed to roll your eyes and walk away. I think that's great. I think what I love about what you've included in the book is there's lots of practical things, like you say, frozen fruit, things in tins, stuff that doesn't make a glamorous Instagram post and won't necessarily get the attention that it otherwise would. And I think in terms of the perimenopause solution, which I know you co-authored as well for women, it's a great starting point. I think absolutely people should if you can get it all in a book, then get the book. Honestly, it's so much better than trying to pull it together from different Instagram posts. It's all there without the noise, certainly. I think it's great. And you've got another book due, is that right?
Yeah, so the 30-gram plan is being made into a glossy, because people like to see photos of food. So it's been,
I do.
yeah, exactly. It's fair enough. So 30-gram plan was kind of a little bit more sciencey, but it's got 80 recipes in there. And then the cookbook, which we are photographing at the moment, it's got 80 brand new recipes, less science, a bit more kind of practical, and you're straight into it.
Absolutely. I certainly will be looking forward to that. I went to order it and then I realised it's actually not out yet.
February 26th.
Excellent, excellent. I'm sure it's keeping you busy.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Emma.
Oh,
I know people are going to get a lot of value from this. It's great. Where can people find you? If obviously your book is available on Amazon, but where can people find you online to see the pictures?
so the best place, yeah, is Instagram at emma.bardwell. I don't do TikTok. Yeah, I'll see you over there. But, trying very hard at the moment to still kind of respond to people's DMs. So if people have got questions, please ask. I will always do my best to answer them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think me too. I quite like a lot of the conversations. I've been very lucky. I haven't had a lot of hate on social media. Maybe it's all being stored up forever, but
Instagram is quite nice, isn't it? And I think
yeah,
also women see, or people see, that you're building up this really nice community, and that you are sensible, and that you're, doing good.
yeah,
You're
yeah, yeah. I
not
have to
doing
say
thing.
my experience has been positive, but yeah, fabulous. Thank you very much, Emma. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great.